Well, hello there. Welcome again to Drummer Daily. I am so happy that you're here with me. Before we get started, there are some baby birds. I'm in the office in the front of my house right now, and there are some baby birds. We have a couple of bird nests in our front porch, and there are 3 baby birds in one of those nests. So if you hear some strange chirping in the background, it's not my child yelling. It's not me making strange sound effects. I did not add any sound effects to this podcast. It's just the birds outside because it's finally nice weather here. Now I feel sorry. I'm sorry if you are listening to this. Either if you're in I guess you're in the southern hemisphere and it's starting to get colder probably, or if you're listening to this podcast a long time after I'm recording it. It's cold wherever you are. I apologize. But it's nice here and it puts me in a great mood, especially to hear all these birds singing and stuff like that. But that is not why you're here. You're not here to hear me talk about the weather or anything like that. You're here to talk about drumming, and I'm here to talk about drumming. And today I've got a question from a friend of the show, William, and he wants to know, he wrote a really nice email, gave me lots of details, but I don't want to share all the details from his email because obviously I want to protect his privacy. But I think his situation applies to enough of us that I could still answer it. So here you go. He writes in, and his basic question is, he wants to know how he sets himself up to become a pro drummer straight out of high school. So he's still in high school, and he's looking at different jobs he might be able to get once he gets out of high school. And he would love to be in a situation where after he graduates high school, he'd love to be in a situation where he only maybe has to work a real job for a few years, wants to get started being, a pro musician, wants to transition over to making a living as a musician as quickly as possible. And he's got some options. He says he could take an easy job like at a fast food restaurant or something like that. But he's also got other opportunities that might provide him with a little bit better income and a decent job, but it would take so much time away that it might be harder for him to focus on music. And so I wanted to answer that question, but his basic question is, how can I know that I'm on the right path now when I'm still young and I'm going to have to get a job or do something just out of high school, so I know that it's not just going to happen right away, but how can I know that I'm doing the right thing along the way? And so I think I want to answer this in maybe 3 different ways, 3 different answers to the question. So I want to tell you about kind of what I did, because I kind of got started on the path when I was in high school. So I want to kind of share that with you. Maybe you can see some similarities there. I want to talk to you about the idea of not having enough time to pursue it if you do go down the path where you have a job that takes more time. And this would go for any of us who have responsibilities, outside of music, where we have a day job, we have a family to support, things like that. We'll talk about that. And then I also want to talk about specifically how to put all that together and what's the one thing that you can do right now, focus on to know that you're doing the right thing and following that path and moving clearly. All right, so first I just want to tell you, and I'm not going to give you all the details and give you the long story, but as you may already know if you've listened to this podcast at any length of time, I grew up in Nashville, and so one obvious advantage of growing up in Music City, USA, is that either a lot of my friends were musical, played instruments, so it was easy to be in bands, things like that. But also, their parents, some of their parents were professional musicians, and some of their parents were famous. Some of their parents were in famous bands or whatever. So I had a unique perspective, especially, and I didn't move to Nashville until I started high school. And so I, of course, by that time was already a big music fan, and had been drumming and things like that. And so I got the cool perspective of a lot of my friends, when I moved here, once I got to know them, they, were kind of jaded towards the idea of how cool what their parents were doing was, or how talented some of them were themselves, because they just had kind of grown up around it so much. I didn't have that perspective. I came from the outside where I was a fan first and then moved here and then got to kind of get on the inside of the industry that I'd been an outsider on and kind of see how it worked. And I thought all that stuff was so cool. And so I had that extra perspective, and it actually gave me a little extra drive to make it happen for myself, because I had the perspective of not everybody's parents go to the Grammy Awards, and get awards or get interviewed on the red carpet or whatever. So I had that unique perspective of knowing that this was not normal at a very real kind of deep down level. So went to high school. I don't know if I've ever told this part of the story, but I actually got offered I got offered a full ride scholarship to a community college, but I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go to Belmont University, which was a school here, a pretty good music school here in Nashville. Kind of the music business. There's a couple of music business related kind of colleges, and that's one of them around here. Got offered a pretty substantial scholarship to that school, and then my best friend, who I was going to be roommates with, he decided he didn't want to go anymore, and then it had me second guess everything. And so then I ended up deciding to go to community college, the original one that had offered me the scholarship that I turned down. I ended up coming back and going back and going to that college, but of course they'd given my scholarship to somebody else after I turned them down, so I had to pay to go to the college that I could have gone to for free. Anyway, at that moment, so I went through community college for a couple of semesters. I actually don't have enough, and I never went back. I actually don't have enough credits to. I'd still be a sophomore if I went back to community college. Didn't even get through my freshman year. But during that time, I didn't have any real indication that I was making any quote unquote progress towards becoming a pro drummer. I was doing general studies at community college. I was in they had a commercial music ensemble, which was kind of like a after school jazz band that didn't play jazz, played pop music, and basically rehearsed as if we were the backing band for professionals. So I got some experience doing that stuff, but didn't really I wasn't getting bigger and bigger gigs at that point or anything like that. There wasn't really any real clear indication that I was doing anything right. And of course, this was long before I discovered that, what the distinct steps are to take to be a pro drummer, and whether or not you can know if you're on the path or not. I didn't know any of that stuff then, so I was just completely like, I'm going to keep going and maybe I'll get lucky someday. That was kind of my approach. But there was one thing that I did, even in high school, all the way through until I was, I still do it to this day. And that I think is the key to me making that thing happen. And I would say that one thing is the thing that if you do that, especially if you're younger, just getting started, if you do that one thing, that'll be the thing that will probably, as long as you're doing that, you can know you're on the right path. And so I'm going to tell you, I'm teasing that. I'm going to tell you that in a minute. That's number 3. On the number of the 3 ways I'm going to answer the question. So secondly, I do want to tell you, and this is something that I've talked about before on the podcast. If you are not sure if you have enough time to devote to pursuing being a pro drummer, or at least enough time you think, you have a lot of things throughout the day, a lot of responsibilities, you got all these things taking up your time, how can you have time to do anything related to music? And so there's that concept that I've talked about before, where I don't actually know I need to come up with a good name for this, because I have to describe it every time. If you got an idea for a name, write it into me, daniel@danielhadaway.com. But the concept is, I use my imagination to imagine myself already at that goal. So I imagine that I'm already a professional drummer, and I am, playing big gigs, making a living, all that stuff. And then in this imaginary scenario, I go backwards through that. I say, all right, well, what might have happened just before that in my imagination, for me to get there? And I keep stepping back through that, answering that question until I get back to where I am now. And then I just start pursuing that next step in that scenario that I just created, whatever that one thing is. And so you don't pursue being a professional drummer, you pursue whatever that next step is that you've sorted out is the next thing in this, again, imaginary scenario. And then once you get that, you achieve that step, you do the exercise again, and you go back you start from where you're at now, and you time warp ahead in time and imagine that you're a professional drummer, and you go back through again. And so those steps might change each time you get there, but you don't pursue the end goal and get overwhelmed with the idea of how far you are away from it now to where you need to get. You focus on just that next step. If you need to write it all down, whatever you got to do to just identify that one next step. So then, even then, that one next step might seem overwhelming, and especially if you have a lot of things taking up your time, it can feel like you don't even have time to pursue that one next step. So then what I do is I actually perform the same exercise where I kind of backward pace through it with just that small, first goal. And I say, okay, what are all the tiny little steps that might have to happen along the way to get there? And then I say, all right, what is the smallest piece of that I can pursue right now? Is it just literally sitting down at my drum set for 10 minutes? I don't have an hour to practice drums. Can I just sit down for 10 minutes today? Maybe that's what success looks like for me. But whatever that thing is, that smallest little thing, I know that even if I'm really busy, if I can just do that one thing, that I will consider today a success. Now, sometimes, just showing up is success. So some days you don't have much time at all, and it might just be you sat down behind the drum kit. Or some days things go really different than how you think they're going to go, and it literally is just I thought about playing drums today, or I listened really intently to a song on the radio. Some days that's all you can do. So you got to give yourself grace. If you're in that situation where you don't have much time, give yourself grace and say, you know what, today it was still a success, and don't get caught up on how much time you don't have. Focus on the fact that you were able to do something, no matter how small. So do that, and that can be success for you. So what I'm using that for, to answer William specifically, who wrote in the question, is don't necessarily rule out some of these other job opportunities that you have that might take a little more time. Don't assume that just because they take a little more time, you won't be able to pursue being a drummer. It might be the case that it takes up that time, or it might not. But really look at the reality of that situation and what it might look like before you write that off and say, it's not going to be viable. Because I will tell you that making decent money can free you up from having to, feel so much pressure to work a second job or do, odds and ends, side hustles or whatever else it is to support yourself. And so it's not suited for everybody, but some people can still make it work. So you just got to know for yourself if that'll work or not. But number 3, my third answer, to go back to what I talked about during my first answer, which is, what is the one thing that I've done my whole life, or my adult life, I guess. And it's the thing that let me know that I was on the right path. Or now I know that if anyone's doing this thing, even when you're young, and some older people may not take you seriously, some people who might do paid gigs may not take you seriously. The one thing you can do is start working with, so I didn't misspeak there. You have to start working with other people, collaborating in a musical environment, whether that means you start a band, and even if you never play a show and you just practice and you have fun, or maybe it's you make beats on your computer and you collaborate with somebody else who plays an instrument, or you collaborate with a hip hop artist, or whatever, something in musical in nature. But you got to start creating, and you got to start collaborating with other people. You can do that no matter how old you are, and no matter how talented or not talented, or ready or not ready, or skilled or not skilled you are. You can start creating and collaborating. And what creating and collaborating does is 2 things. Number 1, it gets you in front of other people, which of course is a great thing. But more importantly than that, creating and collaborating gets you practice for working with others and showing them that you can enable them to be successful in their music. And I don't mean like making a lot of money successful. I mean, they had a vision for a song, or they really wanted to write a great song, and you helped them do that in some way. Or they really would love to, just to have something created that they haven't created before, and you're a part of that. And it was a joyful experience for those people, or it was a pleasant experience, or it was a fulfilling experience, and you can be a part of that. And not only does it again, help you long run because those people are seeing that you're good at those things, but maybe you're not good at those things right now. And I certainly wasn't necessarily that great at those things when I was younger, but as I did it more and more, as I collaborated with more and more people, like in my church bands or bands I was in high school or whatever else it was, and even out of high school, what I did was I got better and better. Just like anything, you practice it, you get better at it. So you need to start practicing the art and the skill of collaboration. That's the way, as long as you're doing that, you can know pretty well that you're on the right path. Again, you may not see daily, some kind of visible progress, like, I didn't get any paid gigs yesterday and I got one today, and then tomorrow I got paid twice as much. There's not a linear progression through that, but I can assure you that as long as you're working on collaborating with others, that's the right path, especially if you're younger. And then know that if you keep going and keep your head down, stay persistent, that long term, 10 years from now, 7 years from now, whatever, you're going to start getting paid gigs or get better opportunities, and they're going to come from those same people that you invested in today. So don't be afraid to do that. Good luck, William. I appreciate you writing that question in. And wherever you are, whoever you are, I hope you were able to listen to the answers that I gave today and find some common ground with William here and where he's at, or my own experiences, and see how you might be able to start, if nothing else, start creating more, start collaborating more, and know that is a key to becoming a professional drummer. Thanks for listening to Drummer Daily today, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. I know this episode was a little longer, but it's being released right before the weekend, at least when it comes out. So maybe that'll give you a little extra something to listen to on the weekend. Thanks for joining me. We'll talk again really soon. Bye for now.